Coming up on Lawmakers. Georgia's House and Senate district maps are overturned by a federal court. Georgia equality rallies at the Capitol in opposition to Senate Resolution 595, the legislation that would effectively ban gay marriage in Georgia. And a bill that would ban smoking in public buildings, including restaurants and bars, is introduced in the Senate. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Tuesday, February 10th. Here are your hosts, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on our broadcast tonight, the Georgia Rural Health Association announces a major grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation.
And the Senate passes the governor's Bright from the Start legislation, but our top story tonight is redistricting. Georgia's latest redistricting maps for the State, House, and Senate have been overturned by a three-judge federal panel. The court says those maps cannot be used in legislative primaries this summer and legislative elections this fall. The federal judges gave Georgia lawmakers until March 1st to draw new maps. Governor Sonny Perdue, who has led a Republican fight for redistricting, says, quote, "This is a great day for democracy in Georgia."
The language that the courts used in their opinion, throwing out the maps, is clear and convincing that what was done to Georgians was wrong, and we need to come back together and fix it. I firmly believe that the tearing apart of our Georgia communities for purely political purposes was wrong. The people of Georgia should be able to choose their politicians rather than having the politicians choose their people. And I'm pleased that the court agreed in a unanimous fashion. I don't see this as a partisan victory, but rather a victory for all Georgians. I will urge Republicans and Democrats alike in the General Assembly to create maps that adhere to traditional redistricting principles.
Governor Perdue and State Attorney General Thurbert Baker, a Democrat, have been locked in legal battles over Republican challenges to maps drawn when Democrats were a majority in the House and the Senate. Today, the governor said it was time to stop wasting the state's money on court battles.
There is no ambiguity in this decision whatsoever. It is as clear as is the words on the paper. The judges said that it's wrong, and it's time to stop quibbling in the courts and give the General Assembly the opportunity to do what it should have done initially and to draw maps that are fairly drawn, that don't try to get a partisan advantage in their construction.
Governor Perdue and Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson say they would work closely with House and Senate Democrats. Johnson said it was time to put Georgia back together.
This is not a win for the Republican Party. It's a win for the Republic. You know, our founding fathers created a system where the voters can select who they want to represent them and then affect their vote by threatening them in the future. That when partisan politics gets in the way, the people get harmed. They're no longer to be pawns. It's time for us to do our duty and go and do the right thing. We expect to be held to high standards now. We expect to be watched of what our process goes through to protect the communities of interest, put Georgia back together.
Meanwhile, House Democrats called a 5:30 news conference to react to the court decision, but then canceled at the last minute. Efforts to contact Attorney General Thurbert Baker for his reaction have also been unsuccessful. We did catch up with Senate Democratic Caucus Chairman Steve Thompson, who knew of the ruling but who had not read it yet.
All I can say is that I have a lot of faith in our Attorney General, and this is a long process going on in two different cities, a lot of appeals, and I would certainly hope it's appealed. And that's really all I can tell you until I read the opinion.
Thompson did say that the fight over redistricting isn't over yet. There is still the very real possibility that the State Attorney General Thurbert Baker will appeal the ruling by the three-judge federal panel.
I think so. I think that it's a process, and there'll be appeals as there has been. And, you know, 10 years ago, it was 96 before we got the thing settled. And this is 04. So we're 2 years ahead of our record last time. And but I wouldn't feel comfortable in commenting any further than say I've just got a great deal of faith in the expertise and the opinion of our Attorney General and his competency.
To recap our top story, a three-judge federal panel has thrown out Georgia's state House and Senate maps, saying they're in violation of the one-man, one-vote principle. The court said the current maps can't be used in the 2004 legislative primaries or elections, and the court gave the legislature until March to draw new district maps. Now, in other headlines, members of Georgia Equality held their second Capitol rally this session against legislation that would make any marriage not between a man and a woman unconstitutional in Georgia. David Zelski joins us live from the Capitol with more. David.
Well, thanks, Nwandi. Senate Resolution 595 takes a language that is already in Georgia statute and puts it in the Georgia Constitution. Now, members of Georgia Equality urge their supporters to make their voices heard today because the resolution goes to Senate rules in the morning.
We are under attack this year like we have never been before.
Senate Resolution 595 would take the Georgia Defense of Marriage Act and place it into the Georgia Constitution, something Georgia Equality, along with several Georgia legislators, say discriminates against minorities.
I think that the senators that are promoting this like the attention, and it's unfortunate to me that they would waste the time of the Senate on something that's so divisive as this.
Representative Carla Drenner responded to a couple of last week's preachers in the House who applauded the legislature for supporting Senate Resolution 595. She has since received emails questioning her own morality.
Some state legislatures and overreaching judges in our great union have embraced and endorsed the sin of sodomy by granting approval to same-sex unions. And I applaud this great assembly for taking a stand to defend the sanctity of marriage.
After the incident with regard to the pastors, I got an email that said, "Dear Representative Drenner, what makes you think that God could love you?" Now, my friends, let me tell you, I know that God loves me, and He loves you too. God loves us all.
I can't speak for, the prejudices of people in this state, in our city. You're always going to have that. It's just part of human nature.
Senator Mike Crotz sponsors the resolution and doesn't believe a judge should have the power to rule the current marriage law unconstitutional because of personal opinion.
This puts the voice of the people in place rather than the voice of a judge.
Now, if this resolution passes Senate rules tomorrow, it still must receive a two-thirds vote in both the Senate and the House to move on. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
Thank you, David.
Meanwhile, the Senate today passed Governor Perdue's Bright from the Start legislation. This part of the governor's education package deals in large part with giving the newly created Office of Early Care and Education more control over daycare and pre-K programs. The governor's Senate floor leader explains.
Right now in Georgia, we have a great group of state employees at the Department of Human Resources whose job it is to inspect daycare centers that do not have a pre-K function. While at the same time, we have an area of our state government with some great employees over at the Office of School Readiness that have a job of inspecting daycare centers that have a pre-K program. What we want to do with this bill is to consolidate those functions so that the Office of Bright from the Start, changing the name, consolidating the two to one, calling it Bright from the Start, will have the sole function of examining and licensing our daycare centers, whether with a pre-K or without a pre-K. One other important thing we believe this will do is that it will infuse more of a culture of education into every daycare center. Whereas right now, we believe that the pre-K operating daycare centers tend, because of their curriculum, because of the restrictions and requirements that are placed on them, tend to have more of a culture of education than the non-pre-K daycare centers. By consolidating the two, we will bring this about, we think, in a better way for all of Georgia's children.
Senator Lee said the consolidation of functions should be efficient and save the state money, and Lee urged the passage of an amendment offered by Senator Steve Thompson that called for more frequent inspections of child care facilities.
I truly think that the administration on this issue is moving in the right direction. This is progressive in the best sense of the word. The caution that I had, or that I talked with the floor leaders about, and the education chairman, I want to thank the education chairman and the floor governors Floor Leader. The concern I had is the reason we're changing back to annually is because that sometimes we have a situation where with huge departments and mammoth responsibilities, through no intent or no fault, well, I won't say no fault, but through no intent and lack of personnel, some children fall through the cracks, and you've seen the tragedies that we've had in Georgia. And for that reason, so as to make sure that at least on an annual basis, that they are audited in such a way as far as looking at the operations of the facility under their licensure, that someone would do that and not have a situation where they could go 2 or 3 years without being checked as to what kind of quality they're providing in their early education program.
The Thompson Amendment and Senate Bill 456 passed without opposition and go to the House.
Senator Don Thomas introduces legislation that would ban smoking in Georgia restaurants, bars, and other public buildings. Lawmakers Chrissy Thrasher joins us live with more. Chrissy.
In Wandy, if the legislation passes, Georgia may soon join several other states, including California and Florida, to outlaw smoking in public buildings.
The Georgia Alliance for Tobacco Prevention says it's time to stop exposing people to secondhand smoke and to ban smoking in public buildings in Georgia.
Secondhand smoke, or environmental tobacco smoke, is a danger, a recognized health hazard to adults and children in our society. Involuntary exposure to secondhand smoke is a serious, common public health hazard that is entirely preventable. How? By adopting and enforcing appropriate regulatory policies that generate smoke-free environments, which remain the most effective means of reducing secondhand smoke exposure.
And today, Senator Don Thomas introduced a bill that would do just that.
We intend to ban it in restaurants, bars, workplace, any enclosed structure, public buildings. We must do it this year. We just have to do it. You know, we have child endangerment laws before us this year to pass, and I can assure you that secondhand smoke that we're forcing our children to breathe is child endangerment.
While this legislation is gaining much support in the Senate, Senator Kasim Reed, who is co-sponsoring the bill, recognizes the challenges this legislation faces.
But I think that we have the time in this session to work this bill. I think that the public will, at the end of the day, because of events like this, be on the side of moving this bill, but it's going to be tough.
While there is currently no state law banning smoking in public buildings, Gwinnett and DeKalb counties both recently passed a no-smoking ban. Reporting live, I'm Chrissy Thrasher for Lawmakers.
Chrissy, before you go, have there been any previous attempts by the legislators to ban smoking in public buildings?
Well, in Wandy, similar legislation has been introduced dating back to 1995, but failed to pass.
Thanks, Chrissy.
Meanwhile, Senate Republican leaders have introduced a bill requiring that all electronic votes in Georgia produce a paper record. Senate Bill 500 proposes that those paper records be retained for use in recounts and in challenged elections.
Well, it generated no debate in the House, but the passage of a measure to allow those who raise earthworms to be covered by federal crop insurance provided plenty of opportunities for merrymaking. Here's a sampling.
To my friend in the well, yes, does this also include wheat worms?
Wheat worms? Yeah, you know, the maggots we used to call them.
I don't know if it is. I don't know about that one. Now, this just goes with the annelids for earthworms. I think that's where we're going right there, Mr. Ames. Thank you.
We'll yield to the gentleman from the 42nd.
I would be glad to.
The gentleman in the well.
Yes, sir.
Are you legalizing hermaphrodites?
Mr. Sims, we'll ask you to respect the gentleman's question now.
I will. Only you would know that answer, Mr. Stevens.
You will yield to the gentleman from the first.
Reluctantly, yes, I will.
Does your mama have anything to do with these earthworms? Does she grow them up?
She's worried about them, I'll tell you that, Mr. Snow. She's worried about those earthworms.
Well, my mama never did like worms or snakes.
I don't see any more questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. If no other question, I'll yield.
The bill also compelled a longtime legislator to admit that his law firm has a vested interest in this legislation. Representative Larry Walker recounted what he called a true story about a time when he represented a worm farmer.
And so we went to see the Houston County tax assessors. And they said, yes, in fact, they were going to ad valorem taxes on his worm beds. And I said, this is an agricultural product. You can't tax these worm beds. They said, it's not an agricultural product. I said, I'll tell you what you're going to do. If you tax these worm beds, you're going to count every one of the worms, and you're not going to tax him for one worm that he doesn't have. They decided that it was an agricultural product. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't pass this bill, your tax assessors are going to be in your counties counting these worms. You better pass this bill. Thank you very much.
On a serious note, vermiculture, the raising of earthworms for bait or fertilizer, is a $1 million business in Georgia. House Bill 1101 passed by a vote of 169 to 1 and now moves to the Senate.
In other news, the Georgia Rural Health Association is receiving a $500,000 revolving loan. The loan is being awarded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. That happened today, and Lawmakers Jesse Freeman is here live with more. Jesse.
Well, Gerald, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is one of the world's largest philanthropic organizations. The revolving loan fund establishes capital for rural health care providers in 8 states, the newest being Georgia. House Speaker Terry Coleman made the announcement today.
The Department of Community Health, Office of Rural Health Services, Mercer University School of Medicine, the Development Corporation of Middle Georgia have all formed a partnership, along with their most important partner right now, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, to establish the Rural Healthcare Revolving Loan Fund.
The foundation has awarded the Development Corporation of Middle Georgia $500,000 in seed capital. The money will be managed by Penn State University's Rural Health Policy Center.
Those dollars will be used to leverage with other private sector dollars. For example, you may take $50,000 of this pool and work with the bankers in order to secure additional capital.
That capital will help public and private organizations such as Mercer University School of Medicine.
We are challenged, as you know, for trying to get the physicians to go to rural areas because of economic, technology issues. And the revolving loan fund is a wonderful opportunity to help us to partner with our graduates as they come back to serve Georgia.
Administrators will begin granting the loans immediately.
We're going to match this with bank funds and hopefully some other contributors to the fund, but we're going to be out making loans in the next few months.
Now, the award does come with a matching requirement. The Development Corporation of Middle Georgia must generate $3 million to match the foundation's fund over the next 10 years. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
A House Appropriations Subcommittee on Community Health today heard more testimony about how cuts will affect the public health budget, and particularly in effect to disabled persons, seniors, women, and children. One county says the cuts will come on top of the negative effects of a deal brokered with the Department of Community Affairs in the early 90s.
In the early 1990s, we had that problem, and we went to them and talked to them about it, and we agreed as a community, EMS community, to let them assess a license fee. So we went from $0 to $5,350 overnight for a license fee. This was supposed to bring down indigent care trust funds, and the idea was to match our reimbursements under Medicaid to what Medicare would pay us, and that would be enough to keep us going. Last April, the department dropped a bomb on EMS, and the unfortunate thing is we are only finally finding out about it in the last couple of months. They changed the way they paid us as far as the crossover payments, so they limit the amount of money they pay us to what Medicaid would normally pay, a significant decrease.
Meanwhile, Elizabeth Apley of the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta said the cost of the proposed cuts is too high because they will lead to a loss in federal money and because they come on top of earlier cuts.
It was 1991, during the time of the last recession, that Georgia legislature decided to cut preventive non-emergency dental care. We've enjoyed then a decade of the longest, largest sustained economic expansion as this country has ever seen, and yet today in Georgia all we provide over that decade was emergency care. These things don't automatically come back. They don't automatically come back.
The Putting Georgia's First listening tour will bring representatives of the House Democratic Caucus to a city near you. From 10 a.m. to noon, Fulton County representatives will meet at the Mills Senior Center in Atlanta. The DeKalb delegates will be at Glenwood Elementary School in Decatur from 9:30 until 11:30. Cobb County representatives will meet from 10 to noon in the Cobb County Commission chambers in Marietta. Majority Leader Jimmy Skipper meets constituents between 10:30 and noon at the Board of Education building in Albany. The meeting in Macon will be from 10:30 to noon at Macon City Hall. In Augusta, the listening tour will touch down between 10:30 and noon at the Henry Brigham County Center. Clark County residents will meet between 10 a.m. and noon at Athens Technical College. In Muskogee County, the delegation will meet from 10:30 to noon at the Government Center in Columbus. Representative Mike Snow will meet constituents from 10 to noon at the Civic Center in Chickamauga, and Representative Buddy Childers will host a listening session from 2 to 4 at the Roman Forum in Rome. For more information about the tour, phone 678-637-3716.
Representative Mickey Chanel drew a barrage of questions today on the House floor as he encouraged support for House Bill 1254. The measure would amend a bill that Chanel sponsored in 2002, creating a procedure to eliminate certain railroad crossings. Many of his colleagues questioned the bill's intent. Here's Representative Tom Bordeaux.
I'm trying to understand what the railroad's going to have to do if this bill passes in order to close a grade crossing. Under the present laws, I've understood what you've said the railroad has to petition the city, the county, whoever, for permission.
Correct.
Page 1, line 24 of your bill says, no railroad shall have the duty to file a petition for elimination of a railroad crossing, grade crossing.
That is correct. They don't. That's the whole point. Chairman Bordeaux, is this bill makes it plain that they don't have a duty to do that, but under the law, if they don't do it, they can't close it. This simply makes it clear that they don't have a duty to petition to close every railroad crossing in the state. However, to close a railroad crossing, they do have to petition.
Thank you for that clarification.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that. I mean, it's just purely and simply that they don't have to have an affirmative reason to absolutely file a petition to close every railroad crossing. If they're going to close a railroad crossing, they have to ask permission on the current law of the governing authority that is affected, whether that be a city, whether that be a county. The city or the county can agree or disagree.
In the end, it seems most House members understood the bill well enough to approve it. House Bill 1254 passed by a vote of 121 to 46 and now heads to the Senate.
Senate Bill 441 would require more documentation when Superior Court review panels intervene and reduce a prison sentence. Here's Senator Bill Hamrick.
Currently, Georgia law allows any defendant whose sentence is longer than 12 years to have a sentence review panel of Superior Court judges. The decision is final. The District Attorneys Association is asking for this legislation to require two things. To require the panel to issue a written opinion or memorandum of their decision stating the facts, especially that form the basis for the reduction of the sentence if that occurs. The sentence review panel currently can reduce a sentence given by a judge in court, and the district attorneys are just asking that decision be written. It also limits the jurisdiction of the panel to sentences that are not negotiated sentences. In other words, if the prosecutor and the defense attorney and the defendant and the victims make compromises and enter into negotiated pleas, and the defendant has an attorney, those will no longer be reviewable by the sentence review panel.
Does this in any way keep them from using their judicial discretion in sentencing?
No, this is a sentence review after you've been through the process. Once you've been convicted and sentenced, then there's another 3-judge panel that can review sentences of 12 years or more and then reduce it. So I mean, they use discretion, but it's not a trial judge's discretion. It's a review panel discretion.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes.
So if the Superior Court judge has used their discretion in sentencing, this bill can undo their decision.
It can, yes.
Thank you, Senator.
Senate Bill 441 passed by substitute. The vote was 46 to 5. It goes to the House.
Senator Bill Hamrick says there's an inconsistency in one phase of murder sentences in Georgia. Senate Bill 442, he says, addresses that.
It clears up a loophole in the law under our recidivist statute that currently allows for the sentence of life without parole for rape and other serious felonies, but it does not allow for a sentence of life without parole for murder. And it's just clearly an inconsistency in the law that needs to be cleaned up.
Senate Bill 442 passed 50 to 0 and heads for the House.
A bill allowing retired teachers to return to work was passed today in the Senate Retirement Committee. Currently, retired teachers can only teach half the time after retiring. House Bill 366 allows a retired teacher to work full-time in any system in the state without losing retirement benefits. Representative Brooks Coleman believes this will help with the shortage of teachers in some school systems.
Because of the real problem we have with teachers, the university systems, as you know, are only producing about 3,000. We need about 15,000 every year. And in rare instances like Gwinnett and in the state, there's about 300 or 400 vacancies they need to find teachers today. Gwinnett has like, I think she told me like 40-something they needed, like early childhood and middle, that they need to fill the positions. And what this bill does, it allows them, if they can't find, to go out and find someone to return to work.
Retired teachers returning to work will still be required to pay all employee contributions to the retirement system. House Bill 366 now goes to Senate rules.
Well, a bill making it a felony to sell children was given a due pass by the House Judiciary Committee today. Senate Bill 281 closes a loophole that makes buying a child illegal, but not the act of selling the child.
What we really want to do when we have children in the court initially is to use informal adjustment as a form of diversion. When they complete the informal adjustment, for all practical purposes, the case stands dismissed. We have if we change it from shall to may, we have discretion to seal the records, but if we're required to seal the records in every single case, that creates a big workload for us.
Senate Bill 281 was approved by committee substitute and moves on to the House Rules Committee. Now, another bill dealing with child welfare was also heard. House Bill 1331 gives juvenile courts the right to seal records from informal adjustments. Now, these are used in place of formal juvenile court hearings. By giving the court choice in sealing the records, bill supporters say administrative workloads can be reduced. And House Bill 1331 was given a due pass by the committee and moves to House Rules Committee. One more note from House Judiciary Committee meeting today. Committee Chair Tom Bordeaux said that all tort reform bills will be sent to subcommittee to work out all details before the bill comes to the full committee.
A reminder, lawmakers will not be broadcast tomorrow night because the Georgia General Assembly will be in recess. Lawmakers returns Thursday, February 12th at 7 with all the latest from under the Gold Dome. Now stay tuned for Great Cars as that program explores the history of the Corvette. Great Cars is next here on Georgia Public Broadcasting.
And that's our broadcast for this, the 15th day of the Georgia General Assembly. Thanks for joining us. I'm Wandy Lawson.
And I'm Gerald Bryant. For everyone here at Lawmakers, good night.
Good night.